How many of you guys enjoyed or you guys got into Game of Thrones? Just by a raise of hands. People got into Game of Thrones. David almost fell out of his chair. He was like, yeah. I'm going to be honest, I felt like the ending was a little disappointing. But beyond that, pretty interesting. Here's what I'm going to tell you. The reason why I bring that up, we are heading into 2 Samuel. Okay? When it came to 1 Samuel, I was very, we went chapter by chapter, story by story. I mean, if you followed along, you pretty much know the story of 1 Samuel. 2 Samuel, it's kind of like Game of Thrones. So if you're really into Game of Thrones, I want to encourage you that as we go through this, that you would read it for yourself. The problem is that it gets very intricate and there's a lot of details and you can get kind of lost in the weeds. And so I'm going to kind of give you kind of the main points of 2 Samuel. But if you're really, really into kind of the drama and all that kind of stuff, I'm telling you, read 2 Samuel. Now, let me give you the introduction to 2 Samuel, or at least the recap of 1 Samuel. Remember, the main story in 1 Samuel was this issue where King Saul, he was the king, but David was anointed as the next king. And the big question is, when is David finally going to be able to be king? King Saul was hunting down David. David kept escaping from him. Okay? Finally, David got tired of the whole game, and so then he went and he started living with the enemy in a town called Ziklag. And the way that the whole last season, if you will, finished is that King Saul goes in to fight a battle. He loses his life, and then remember the word comes to David, and this one guy thinks that he's bringing David good news. Hey, and I was the one who killed King Saul, and it was a lie, and David put him to death. He goes, "How dare you touch the Lord's anointed?" Okay, and so that's kind of where we're at, but it still leaves us with all kinds of questions. David is still living in foreign territory. He's living with the enemy. How is David then going to move? How is he going to become king? How are people going to be able to trust him? And what we're going to find in the beginning of this story is that David keeps doing the right thing, but other people's wickedness and pain keep getting in the way. And so the question that I'm asking, or I want you guys to ask along with me, is why does God allow wickedness and pain when I'm trying to do the right thing? I bet you if we were able to kind of talk to David during that time, if we were able to kind of transport over there and go, "Hey David, what's going on?" This would have been his question. "God, I've been waiting for this for so long. You promised me this. Why does wickedness and pain keep getting in the way?" And I'll be honest with you, I can relate to that because many of you guys know my story. I'm a business owner, and I started this business in the midst of one of the biggest tragedies that had ever happened in my life. A guy who I thought was my best friend was stealing from the church. It was horrible. But that's when God gave me the opportunity. So we jumped into it. And the business that I'm in, all of my competitors, they're very dishonest people. They don't do the right things. They pay half the people off the books so they don't have to pay taxes and all this kind of garbage. They lie and they cheat. And so we started a company and we called it FEH Transportation, standing for Fast, Easy, and Honest. Right? And then the two guys that helped me to start the business, their Spanish is their first language. And so when they saw it, they were like, he's a pastor. Fe Transportation. F-E means faith in Spanish, right? So I didn't realize that, but that was something that kind of, I guess God did, right? But here's the problem. So we get started, and we start doing everything the right way. Our competitors start lying about us and cheating, and it ends up, right, causing all kinds of pain, not just for me, but for my employees. I actually came to you guys as a church, and I asked you guys, "Hey, would you pray with me about Jacksonville?" Because I had this one employee up there, and I felt bad. And so the question is, Why does God allow wickedness and pain when I'm trying to do the right things? Perhaps you guys have been trying to do the right things. I've had a lot of you guys who have come up to me and said, you know what, I keep trying to do the right thing over and over and over again. But yet my relationships, I'm still having problems in my relationships. Or I'm trying to do the right things when it comes to work and to school. But while I'm doing the right thing, I'm not cheating, I'm not doing, I'm not lying, but everybody else is. And they're laughing at me because it's working for them, and being honest is not working for me. Or perhaps you had some bad habits. And yeah, they were bad habits, but at least they worked. The problem is this whole Jesus thing doesn't seem to be working. And so the temptation is like, I know what I was doing before wasn't right, but man, at least it worked. At least I saw some results. Why does God allow wickedness and pain when I'm trying to do the right thing? In order to answer this question, we're actually going to open up to 2 Samuel chapter 2. I'll have the scriptures up. Again, I'm going to tell you a lot of stories because we're going to actually go through 3 chapters today. So I'm not going to read all of those scriptures. I'm going to tell you the majority of the story. So 2 Samuel chapter 2. After this, David inquired of Yahweh. That's a good sign. He's trying to do the right thing. He's still talking with Yahweh, right? After this, David inquired of Yahweh, shall I go up into any cities of Judah? Now, wait a minute. I thought he was supposed to become the king of Israel. Why is he going to Judah? Well, Judah was one of the tribes of Israel, and it's the tribe that he's from. So if any of the tribes is going to accept him as king, it's going to be his own people. So David asked Yahweh, should I go back to my home tribe? And Yahweh said to him, go up. And David said, well, which of the cities should I go up to? And God said to him, to Hebron. So David moves his family, and he moves all of his men and their families to Hebron. And when he gets there, verse 4, the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. So now he's not in enemy territory anymore. He's back where he needs to be. His own tribe has anointed him as king over Israel. And then they told David, it was the men of Jabesh Gilead who buried King Saul. You guys remember last week there was like the city of Jabesh Gilead, and they found out that King Saul's body was desecrated, and they had put it up on a wall. And so they did a covert mission in the middle of the night and took his body off the wall, and they buried it. They honored their king. Well, now that David is becoming king, they're probably concerned, going, I wonder if David, because David and Saul were at odds with each other, is David now going to come after us for what we did? But David had a different heart as a king. Verse 5, David sent messengers to the men of Jabesh Gilead and said to them, may you be blessed by Yahweh because you showed this loyalty to Saul your Lord and buried him. He goes, I'm going to honor your loyalty. And just like you were loyal to King Saul, I'm going to be loyal to you. Verse 6. Now, may Yahweh show steadfast love and faithfulness to you, and I will do good to you because you have done this thing. So far so good. He's moved back. He's making friends, winning hearts, but not because he's like a political guy. It's just because he's got a great heart, right? But here's the wrench. Verse 8. But Abner, son of Ner, commander of Saul's army. You guys actually should recognize Abner. Abner is the guy. Do you guys remember the part of the story in 1 Samuel where the second time David has an opportunity to kill King Saul, but he doesn't? And everybody's sleeping. And he goes to the middle of the camp. And his buddy's like, hey, let me just stick a spear through him. And he's like, no. And he takes his spear and his water jug. And he goes to the next mountain hill over. And then he calls back over and he starts taunting the commander of his army, Abner. He says, they should put you to death because you weren't even protecting the king. Well, this is the same guy, Abner. Okay? Abner's a very powerful man. So Abner, the son of Ner, commander of Saul's army, took Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim. Okay, so what is he doing? Verse 9. And he made him king over Gilead and the Asherites and Jezreel and Ephraim and Benjamin and all of Israel. And so this guy, Abner, he had made his bed with the family of King Saul. So he's like, man, if David becomes king, I'm not going to be able to be as powerful anymore. And so he goes, oh, well, there's a relative of King Saul, so I'm gonna make him king. And so it was kind of like Saul's son. He wasn't really a great king, but he was a good guy, you know. So Abner felt like he could control the kingdom through this guy. So now you've got something in the middle of David trying to become king. So David's king over his tribe, but all the rest of the tribes are under this guy, Ishbosheth. Now, I'm going to tell you a story that happens. Skirmishes start happening between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Okay? Between David's men and the rest of the men. So Abner lines up, and he's got his guys. It's kind of like the Sharks and the Jets, you know. They come out, and they're going to fight, right? And so David's men come out, and there's his nephew, who is Joab, comes out, and they get into a skirmish. They start fighting. Well, Abner's men start losing. Abner starts running away. So he's running away. This is not working out good for him. And so Joab's brother, young guy, fast, starts chasing Abner because he knows that he can catch up to him. Right? So he's chasing down Abner. Abner has respect for Joab and his family, and he doesn't want to kill this kid. And so he calls out over his shoulder. He's like, stop chasing me. I'm going to kill you if you catch up to me. The kid said, no, I'm going to come after you. I'm going to get you. Abner calls out again and begs with him, and please go do something else. Don't do this. The kid keeps coming. And so finally, just as the kid is getting ready to catch up to him, this is what I believe happened. Abner had a spear in his hand, and I think he was trying to butt him with the back of the spear, like in the chest, so that he would stop. But what ended up happening is, since they were running and the momentum of everything that happened, maybe the spear ended up going into the ground or something, but the butt of the spear actually went through the kid and killed him. Why do I think it was an accident? Because I think if Abner really wanted to kill the guy, he'd have put the pointy part through him. But Abner escaped. Now Joab's upset. Now this is not just business. This is personal. A couple years go by. Abner gets really tired of Ishbosheth. They get into a fight over a woman. And Abner's like, you're not a real king. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go and I'm going to broker a deal between the northern kingdom and David, because he's a real king. So Abner goes to David, starts negotiating. He even brings David's first wife, Michal. Remember Saul's daughter? He brings her back. And so everything's going well. And this is what happens in chapter 3. Verse 21. And Abner said to David, I will arise and go and will gather all Israel to my lord the king, that they may make a covenant with you, and that you may reign over all that your heart desires. So David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. So David has now brokered a deal with Abner. Abner's already gone around, gotten permission from the rest of Israel. The deal is done. All that needs to happen now is Abner just needs to go back and say, hey, David's ready to meet. Let's make this happen. Right? That's all that needs to happen. David's like, finally, we've gotten to the point where I'm finally going to become king like God promised. But, verse 22, just then the servants of David arrived with Joab from a raid, bringing much spoil with them. But Abner was not with David at Hebron, for he had sent him away, and he had gone in peace. What do you think happened when Joab found out that David was meeting with Abner? How could you meet with Abner? Don't you know that he killed my brother? Don't you think that he's just laying a trap for you? Verse 26, and when Joab came out from David's presence, he sent messengers after Abner, and they brought him back from the cistern of Sirah, but David did not know about it. Verse 27, and when Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside into the midst of the gate to speak with him privately. Yay, come, let me tell you a little secret over here. And there he struck him in the stomach, probably with a knife, so that he died for the blood of Asahel, his brother. Man, it's like Game of Thrones. Actually, I kind of feel like at the closing of this scene, because now it's like, but what happened to the deal? What's going to happen with David and the kingdom? It almost feels like The Godfather, right? Right? It's kind of one of those moments. Verse 31, then David said to Joab and to all the people who were with him, tear your clothes and put on sackcloth and mourn before Abner. And King David followed the bier. A bier is like, it's kind of like a casket, but back then it was open so that everybody could see it. It looked like a bed. And they would actually walk it to where the tomb was. And so David was actually there, and he was mourning over Abner. Verse 32, and they buried Abner at Hebron, and the king lifted up his voice, and he wept at the grave of Abner, and all the people wept as well. David was legitimately upset. He wasn't putting on a show. And something interesting happens, right? The people get to see David's true heart. Verse 35, then all the people came to persuade David to eat bread while it was still yet day. David was fasting. But David swore, saying, God do so to me and more also if I taste bread or anything else until the sun goes down. He's like, I will fast for Abner. And what ends up happening? Verse 36, and all the people took notice of it. And it pleased them. As everything that the king did pleased all the people. Verse 37, so all the people and all Israel understood that day that it had not been the king's will to put to death Abner, the son of Ner. And this interesting thing happened, right? That the deal was supposed to happen, the deal fell through, and it was because of wickedness, and it caused pain. But yet God used that so that people could see the true heart of David. David could have brokered a deal, but he wouldn't have had the people's hearts. Let me tell you something. As a leader, I know this. You can lead either through fear or through love. It's a lot harder to lead through respect and love. But let me tell you something. If you can get people to respect and love you because they see your true heart, they'll go to the ends of the earth and beyond for you. And that's the kind of kingdom that God was trying to set up for King David. But then there's this problem. There's still a king. How's it going to happen now? What's going to happen with this king? Now the deal's fallen through. 2 Samuel chapter 4. Now, I'm going to give you this. This doesn't have anything to do with the story specifically today, but I can't miss over this because it's going to be important later. Verse 4, Jonathan, the son of Saul, remember he was the best friend of David, had a son who was crippled in his feet. Why was he crippled? Because he was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel. So the day that Jonathan died, the news got to where his son was. And the son's nurse took him up and fled. But as she fled in her haste, he fell and became lame. So it was actually the nurse's fault. And his name was, hang in there, Mephibosheth. Now I want you to remember that name, Mephibosheth, because maybe it's going to be your next child's name. Or I'd like for us to see how David is actually going to treat Jonathan's kid. Because remember, David made a promise to Jonathan he was going to take care of the family. But this kid has a right to the throne, so how is that going to work? Okay? Now, in verse 5, the sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite, Rechab and Baanah, these are two guys who are captains of the army of Israel, set out, and about the heat of the day they came to the house of Ishbosheth, the king of the north, as he was taking his noonday rest. Verse 6, and they came into the midst of the house as if to get wheat. It was normal for them to be there, and they stabbed him in the stomach. Then Rechab and Baanah, his brother, escaped. Okay, why would they do that? Because they knew that David was going to eventually be king. So verse 7, here's a little bit more detail. When they came into the house, as he lay on his bed in his bedroom, they struck him and put him to death. And then they beheaded him. And they took his head and went by the way of Arabah all night, verse 8, and brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron. And they said to the king, here is the head of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, your enemy, who sought your life. Yahweh has avenged my lord the king this day on Saul and on his offspring. So they were like, hey, David's going to be king. Let's kill this king, bring the head of this king to David, and David will be pleased with us, and he'll honor us, and we'll become powerful people in David's kingdom. Verse 9, but David was a different kind of king. He answered Rechab and Baanah, his brother, the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite. He goes, as Yahweh lives, who has redeemed my life out of every adversity. Verse 10, when one told me, behold, Saul is dead. Remember the guy who came to him? And thought he was bringing good news. I seized him and killed him at Ziklag, which was the reward I gave him for his news, for his lies. Verse 11, how much more when wicked men have killed a righteous man in his own house on his bed, shall I now require his blood at your hand and destroy you from the earth? Verse 12, and David commanded his young men, and they killed them, and cut off their hands and feet, and hanged them beside the pool at Hebron. But they took the head of Ishbosheth, and buried it in the tomb of Abner at Hebron. So here's what I want you to see. In the midst of David continuing to try to do the right thing over and over, he's surrounded by wicked people and pain. But yet God can even use that to accomplish his will. And that's what I want you guys to see. Why does God allow wickedness and pain when I'm trying to do the right things? God can even use wickedness and pain to accomplish his will. Now, would God prefer that we would all just be perfect and holy and that he would accomplish his will through that? Of course he would. But here's the cool thing about God. God is so big that even in spite of the wickedness and the pain, he can actually use that against Satan and against the power of darkness to accomplish his good will. It's the great reversal, and God can do it, and God did it in David's life. Here are the forces of evil trying to keep David from being king over Israel, and God uses those things that try to take David away from that and actually bring him closer to it. Because God is that big. God can even use wickedness and pain to accomplish his will. And I'm going to tell you, I've seen that in my life. And my life has not been rosy by any stretch of the imagination. It's not it's not one of those like, oh, everything's going to be okay. I mean, there's some times where I was thinking to myself, I don't know how I'm even going to get through another day. But God has used the wickedness and the pain to bring blessings into my life. And like I told you with the business, all of those competitors that were lying, the funny thing about it is wicked people, they kind of can't help but be wicked. Let me tell you the difference between righteous and wicked people. Righteous people, they can do wicked things, but righteous people eventually go back to doing righteous things. So if you look at the pattern of their life, it's marked much more by righteousness than it is by wickedness. But wicked people can't help but do wicked things. They can do one nice thing here or there, but they can't help themselves. Over time, they end up shooting themselves in the foot, and that's exactly what's happened with my competitors. It's not like they could just lie one time about me and be done. They continue to lie to the customers, and at the end of the day, the customers have been like, hey, wait a minute. FEH is actually an honest company that does what they say that they're going to do, and these people are a bunch of liars. And so we're winning. We're winning in Jacksonville. We're winning in Miami. Whereas they used to have a bunch of teams and we only had one team. Now we're the ones with a bunch of teams and they only have one. And you know what? At the end of the day, God can even use the wickedness and pain to accomplish His will. Righteous people always end up doing righteous things. Wicked people always end up doing wicked things. I always tell Michelle this. Crazy people can only hide their crazy for so long. Have you guys ever noticed that? They can do a crazy thing and then act like they're normal, but it doesn't last. It comes out in the end, right? So maybe you're here and you're doing the right things and you're frustrated because you're trying to do the right things. You're trying to live a life righteous for God, but it doesn't seem to be working. I want to remind you that God can even use wickedness and pain to accomplish His will. Maybe your relationships aren't working out the way that you thought that they should because you're trying to do the right thing. And the temptation is to go back to the things that were working before, but they weren't really working before. Be patient because God can even use wickedness and pain to accomplish His will. Maybe at school or at work, you're tempted to lie or you're tempted to cheat because that's what everybody else is doing. And you seem to be suffering while they seem to be doing just fine. But here's what I'm going to tell you. God will use that wickedness against them and for you. Because God can even use wickedness and pain to accomplish His will. Don't go back to your old habits. Because they only bring pain and wickedness to you and to everyone around you. There's a lot of you who are here today. I believe that God is telling you this. This is the message. Maybe it's not. You judge for yourself. But I believe that God is telling a lot of you guys here today, you keep doing your part and then trust me to do my part. The problem is that we want God to do His part right now. But have you ever thought that maybe right now is not the time? Maybe that there's a better time and God knows it and we just need to trust Him. Sometimes God even allows the wickedness of others so that His light can shine brighter in us. When everybody around us is embroiled in darkness, the light of Jesus Christ can shine brighter in our lives. Because God can even use wickedness and pain to accomplish His will. Guys, I have every week I actually read a memorization verse. I don't usually explain this, but I want to explain why we've done this. I've actually selected 10 scriptures that Jesus said. There are 10 commands of Jesus. Because we're told, as church leaders, to teach the disciples of Jesus everything that He commanded. So we took the top 10 commands, and I'm trying to get you guys to memorize those, right? As I was preparing for this sermon, there were so many of them that actually applied to this. But I wanted to do Matthew 5:16 because we haven't gone over it so much. So read it with me. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Perhaps the pain and the wickedness that you're enduring today is just a part of your testimony. Perhaps God has something much bigger in mind. Maybe He's speaking to other people in your life. I don't know. All I know is this. God can even use wickedness and pain to accomplish His will. Let's pray. You may have everyone bow your heads and close your eyes. Lord Jesus, I know that there's a day, Lord Jesus, that we wake up and we're lost without You, and then when we say yes to Jesus and we really mean it, Lord, that we go to bed saved, Lord. And I was actually talking with David today that even if I have a bad day after that, it doesn't mean that I lose my salvation. Lord, that's a day that my life changed forever. But yet, Lord, accepting your word, even when it's difficult. Lord, it's like we have to keep saying yes to you over and over. Lord, because the more that we say yes to you and the more that we reject what the world is telling us and we reject what we feel like doing, Lord, at the end of the day, what we're essentially doing is just continuing to say yes to you. Lord, I've never said I've never said yes to you on a day when it's easy. Lord, that's never been a struggle. It's always a struggle to say yes to you, Lord, when it's hard. So, Lord, I know that a lot of us are having a hard time saying yes to you. Lord, I pray that today would be maybe another day where we say, you know what, Jesus, I'm throwing up my hands. I don't understand it. It doesn't seem to be working. But I'm going to trust you anyway. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.